Section 11 of the Endeavour Journal of Sir Joseph Banks, Journal from 25 August 1768 to 12 July 1771, by Joseph Banks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Timmerman Vaughan. Section 11, 1769, April, Part 2. 1769, April 15. This morn we landed at the watering place, bringing with us a small tent, which we set up. In doing this, we were attended by some hundreds of the natives, who showed a deference and respect to us, which much amazed me. I myself drew a line before them with the butt end of my musket, and made signs to them to set down without it. They obeyed instantly, and not a man attempted to set a foot within it. Above 2 hours were spent so, and not the least disorder being committed. We proposed to walk into the woods, and see if today we might not find more hogs, etc., than when we last visited them, supposing it probable that a part of them at least had been drove away on our arrival. This in particular tempted us to go away, with many other circumstances, as our old man, an Indian well known to the dolphins, attempted by many signs to hinder us from going into the woods. The tent was left in charge of a midshipman with the marines, 13 in number. We marched away and were absent about 2 hours. A little while before we came back we heard several musket shots. Our old man immediately called us together, and by waving his hand sent away every Indian who followed us, except 3, every one of whom took in their hands a green bough. On this we suspected that some mischief had happened at the tent, and hastened home with all expedition. On our return we found that an Indian had snatched a sentry's musket from him, unawares, and run off. The midshipman, may be, imprudently, ordered the marines to fire. They did fire into the thickest of the flying crowd, some hundreds in number, several shot, and pursuing the man who stole the musket, killed him dead, but whether any others were killed or hurt, no one can tell. No Indian was now to be seen about the tent by our old man, who with us took all pains to reconcile them again. Before night, by his means, we got together a few of them, and explaining to them that the man who suffered was guilty of a crime deserving of death, for so we were forced to make it, we retired to the ship not well pleased with the day's expedition, guilty no doubt in some measure of the death of a man who the most severe laws of equity would not have condemned to so severe a punishment. 1769, April 16. No canoes about the ship this morning. Indeed, we could not expect any, as it is probable that the news of our behaviour yesterday was now known everywhere, a circumstance which will doubtless not increase the confidence of our friends, the Indians. We were rather surprised that the Dolphin's old man, who seemed yesterday so desirous of making peace, was not come on board today. Some few people were upon the beach, but very few in proportion to what we saw yesterday. At noon went ashore, the people rather shy of us, as we must expect them to be, till by good usage we gain anew their confidence. Poor Mr. Buchan, the young man who I brought out as landscape and figure painter, was yesterday attacked by an epileptic fit. He was today quite insensible. Our surgeon gives me very little hopes of him. 1769, April 17. At 2 this morn Mr. Buchan died. About 9 everything was ready for his interment, he being already so much changed that it would not be practicable to keep him even till night. Dr. Solander, Mr. Sporing, Mr. Parkinson, and some of the officers of the ship attended his funeral. I sincerely regret him as an ingenious and good young man, but his loss to me is irretrievable. My airy dreams of entertaining my friends in England with the scenes that I am to see here are vanished. No account of the figures and dresses of men can be satisfactory unless illustrated with figures. Had Providence spared him a month longer, what an advantage would it have been to my undertaking, but I must submit. Our 2 friends, the chiefs of the West, came this morn to see us. One I shall for the future call Lycurgus, from the justice he executed on his offending subjects on the 14th. The other, from the large size of his body, I shall call Hercules. Each of these brought a hog and breadfruit ready dressed as a present, for which they were presented in return with a hatchet and a nail each. Hercules' present is the largest. He seems indeed to be the richest man. In the afternoon we all went ashore to measure out the ground for the tents, which done, Captain Cook and Mr. Green slept ashore in a tent erected for that purpose, after having observed an eclipse of one of the satellites of Jupiter. 1769, April 18. This morn at daybreak all hands were ashore and employed in getting up the tents and making a defence round them. The ground we have pitched upon is very sandy, which makes it necessary to support it with wood. For the doing of this our people cut the boughs of trees, and the Indians very readily assisted them in bringing them down to the place. 3 sides of our fort are thus to be guarded. The other is bounded by a river on the banks of which water casks are to be placed. The Indians brought down so much provision of coconuts and breadfruit today that before night we were obliged to leave off buying, and acquaint them by signs that we should not want any more for 2 days. Everything was bought for beads, a bead about as large as a pea, purchasing 4 or 6 breadfruits, and a like number of coconuts. My tents were got up before night, and I slept ashore in them for the first time. The lines were guarded round by many sentries, but no Indian attempted to come near them during the whole night. 1769, April 19. This morn Lycurgus and his wife come to see us, and bring with them all their household furniture, and even houses to be erected in our neighbourhood, a circumstance which gave me great pleasure, as I had spared no pains to gain the friendship of this man, who seemed more sensible than any of his fellow chiefs we have seen. His behaviour in this instance makes us not doubt of having gained his confidence at least. Soon after his arrival, he took me by the hand, and led me out of the lines, signing that I should accompany him into the woods. This I made no difficulty of doing, as I was desirous of knowing how near us he really intended to settle. I followed him about a quarter of a mile, when we arrived at a small house, or rather the awning of a canoe set upon the shore, which seemed to be his occasional habitation. Here he unfolded a bundle of their clothes, and clothed me in 2 garments, one red cloth, the other very pretty matting. After this we returned to our tents. He ate pork and breadfruit, which was brought to him in a basket, using salt water instead of sauce, and then retired into my bedchamber and slept about half an hour. About dinner time Lycurgus's wife brought a handsome young man about 22 to the tents, whom they both seemed to acknowledge as their son. At night he and another chief, who had also visited us, went away to the westward, but Lycurgus and his wife went towards the place I was at in the morning, which makes us not doubt of their staying with us for the future. Mr. Monkhouse, our surgeon, walked this evening into the woods, and brought back an account of having seen the body of the man who was shot on the 15th. It was placed on a kind of bier supported by stakes, and covered by a small hut, which seemed to have been built for the purpose. The body was wrapped up in cloth, and near it were placed war instruments, a hatchet, some hair, a coconut, and a cup of water. Farther he did not examine on account of the stench of the body, which was intolerable. They also saw 2 more huts of the same kind, in one of which they saw the bones of the person who had lain there quite dry. A custom so new as this appears to be surprised us all very much, but whether all who die are thus disposed of, or it is a peculiar honour shown to those who die in war, is to be cleared up by future observation. 1769, April 20. Rained hard all this day at intervals, so much so that we could not stir at all. The people, however, went on briskly with the fortification in spite of weather. Lycurgus dined with us. He imitates our manners in every instance, already holding a knife and fork more handily than a Frenchman could learn to do in years. Notwithstanding the rain, some provisions are brought to the market, which is kept just without lines. Indeed, ever since we have been here, we have had more breadfruit every day than both the people and hogs can eat. But in the pork way we have been so poorly supplied that I believe fresh pork has not been served to the ship's company above once. 1769, April 21. Several of our friends at the tents this morn, one of whom from his grim countenance we have called Ajax, and at one time thought to be a great king. He had on his canoe a hog, but he chose rather to sell it at the market than give it to us as a present, which we account for by his having in the morning received a shirt in return for a piece of cloth, which made him fear that had he given the hog it might have been taken into the bargain, a conduct very different from that of our friend Lycurgus, who seems in every instance to place a most unbounded confidence in us. 1769, April 22. Pleasant weather. Our friends as usual come early to visit us. Hercules with 2 pigs, and a dolphin's axe, which he wished to have repaired, as it accordingly was. Lycurgus brought 2 large fish, an acceptable present, as that article has always been scarce with us. Trade brisk today. Since our new manufacture of hatchets has been set on foot, we get some hogs, though our tools are so small and bad that I only wonder how they can stand one stroke. The flies have been so troublesome, ever since we have been ashore, that we can scarce get any business done for them. They eat the painter's colours off the paper as fast as they can be laid on, and if a fish is to be drawn, there is more trouble in keeping them off it than in the drawing itself. Many expedients have been thought of. None succeed better than a mosquito net which covers table, chair, painter, and drawings, but even that is not sufficient. A fly trap was necessary to set within this to attract the vermin from eating the colours. For that purpose yesterday tar and molasses was mixed together, but did not succeed. The plate smeared with it was left on the outside of the tent to clean. One of the Indians, observing this, took an opportunity, when he thought that no one observed him, to take some of this mixture up into his hand. I saw, and was curious to know for what use it was intended. The gentleman had a large sore upon his backside, to which this clammy lineament was applied, but with what success I never took the pains to inquire. Hercules gave us today a specimen of the music of this country. 4 people performed upon flutes, which they sounded with one nostril, while they stopped the other with their thumbs. To these 4 more sang, keeping very good time, but during half an hour of which we stayed with them, they played only one tune consisting of not more than 5 or 6 notes. More I am inclined to think they have not upon their instruments, which have only 2 stops. 1769, April 23. Mr. Green and myself went today a little way upon the hills, in order to see how the roads were. Lycurgus went with us, but complained much in the ascent, saying that it would kill him. We found as far as we went, possibly 3 miles, exceeding good paths, and at the farthest part of our walk, boys bringing wood from the mountains, which we look upon to be a sure proof that journey will be easy whenever we attempt to go higher. In our return I visited the tomb or bier in which was deposited the body of the man who was shot. I lifted up the cloth, and saw part of the body already dropping to pieces with putrefaction about him, and indeed, within all parts of his flesh were an abundance of maggots, of a species of beetle very common here. Such an advance of putrefaction in 8 days, for it was no more since he was shot, is almost past credit, but what will not a hot climate and plenty of insects do? We had this evening some conversation about an axe, which was brought in the morning by Hercules. It wanted grinding. Its make was very different from our English ones. Several gentlemen were of the opinion that it was a French one. Some went so far as to give as their opinion that some other ship had been here since the Dolphin. The difficulty, however, appeared to me at least easily solved, by supposing axes to have been taken in the Dolphin as trade, in which case old ones might have been bought of the make of any country, for many such I suppose there are in every old iron shop in London. 1769, April 24. Dr. Solander and myself went along shore to the eastwards, in hope of finding something worth observation by enlarging our ground. For about 2 miles the country within us was flat and fertile. The hills then came very near the water's edge, and soon after quite into the sea, so that we were obliged to climb over them. This barren country continued for about 3 miles more, when we came to a large flat full of good houses and wealthy-looking people. Here was a river much more considerable than our own. It came out of a very deep and beautiful valley, and was where we crossed it near 100 yards wide, though not quite at the sea. About a mile farther than this river we went, when the land became again as barren as possible, the rocks everywhere projecting into the sea, so we resolved to return. Soon after this resolution, one of the natives made us an offer of refreshment, which we accepted. He was remarkable for being much the whitest man we had seen. On examining him more nearly, his skin was dead pale, without the least signs of complexion in any part of it. Some parts were lighter than others, but the darkest was lighter than any of our skins. His hair and eyebrows and beard were as white as the skin, his eyes bloodshot. He appeared to be very short-sighted. His whole body was scurfy, and maybe disease had been the cause of his colour. If not, we shall see more such. In our return met Lycurgus, who seemed much rejoiced at seeing us, as did all his women. To show their regard, I suppose they all cried most heartily. 1769, April 25. I do not know by what accident I have so long omitted to mention how much these people are given to thieving. I will make up for my neglect, however, today, by saying that great and small chiefs and common men are all firmly of opinion that if they can once get possession of anything, it immediately becomes their own. This we were convinced of the very second day we were here. The chiefs were employed in stealing what they could in the cabin, while their dependents took everything that was loose about the ship, even the glass ports not escaping them, of which they got off with 2. Lycurgus and Hercules were the only 2 who had not yet been found guilty. But they stood in our opinion but upon ticklish ground, as we could not well suppose them entirely free from a vice their countrymen were so much given up to. Last night Dr. Solander led his knife to one of Lycurgus's women, who forgot to return it. This morn mine was missing. I could give no account of it, so resolved to go to Lycurgus and ask him whether or not he had stole it, trusting that if he had, he would return it. I went and taxed him with it. He denied knowing anything concerning it. I told him I was resolved to have it returned. On this, a man present produced a rag, in which was tied up 3 knives. One was Dr. Solander's, the other a table knife, the other no one laid claim to. With these he marched to the tents to make restitution, while I remained with the women, who much feared that he would be hurt. When come there, he restored the 2 knives to their proper owners, and began immediately to search for mine in all the places where he had ever seen it lay. One of my servants, seeing what he was about, brought it to him. He had, it seems, laid it by the day before, and did not know of my missing it. Lycurgus then burst into tears, making signs with my knife that if he was ever guilty of such an action, he would submit to have his throat cut. He returned immediately to me with a countenance sufficiently upbraiding me for my suspicions. The scene was immediately changed. I became the guilty, and he the innocent person. His looks affected me much. A few presents, and staying a little with him, reconciled him entirely. His behaviour has, however, given me an opinion of him much superior to any of his countrymen. 1769, April 26. Plenty of trade this morn. Indeed, we have always had enough of breadfruit and coconuts. Refreshments may be more necessary for the people than pork, though they certainly do not like them so well. Our friends as usual at the tents today, but do nothing worthy of record. 1769, April 27. The day passed as usual. Lycurgus and a friend of his, who eats most monstrously, dined with us. We christened him Epicurus. At night they took their leave and departed, but Lycurgus soon returned with fire in his eyes, seized my arm, and signed me to follow him. I did, and he soon brought me to a place where was our butcher, who he told me by signs had either threatened or attempted to cut his wife's throat with a reap hook he had in his hand. I signed to him that the man should be punished tomorrow, if he would only clearly explain the offence, for he was so angry that his signs were almost unintelligible. He grew cooler and showed me that the butcher had taken a fancy to a stone hatchet, which lay in his house. This he offered to purchase for a nail. His wife, who was there, refused to part with it, upon which he took it, and throwing down the nail, threatened to cut her throat if she attempted to hinder him. In evidence of this, the hatchet and nail were produced, and the butcher had so little to say in his defence that no one doubted his guilt. After this we parted, and he appeared satisfied, but did not forget to put me in mind of my promise that the butcher should tomorrow be punished. This day we found that our friends had names, and they were not a little pleased to discover that we had them likewise. For the future, Lycurgus will be called Tuburai Tamaiti, and his wife Tomio, and the 3 women who commonly come with him, Tarapo, Tararu, and Omi. As for our names, they make so poor a hand of pronouncing them that I fear we shall be obliged to take each of us a new one for the occasion. 1769, April 28. Many of our friends were with us very early, even before day, some strangers with them. Tarapo was observed to be among the women, on the outside of the gate. I went out to her and brought her in. Tears stood in her eyes, which the moment she entered the tent began to flow plentifully. I began to inquire the cause. She, instead of answering me, took from under her garment a shark's tooth, and struck it into her head with great force 6 or 7 times. A profusion of blood followed these strokes, and alarmed me not a little. For 2 or 3 minutes she bred freely, more than a pint in quantity. During that time she talked loud, in a most melancholy tone. I was not a little moved at so singular a spectacle, and holding her in my arms did not cease to inquire what might be the cause of so strange an action. She took no notice of me till the bleeding ceased, nor did any Indian in the tent take any of her. All talked and laughed, as if nothing melancholy was going forward. But what surprised me most of all was that as soon as the bleeding ceased, she looked up smiling, and immediately began to collect pieces of cloth, which during her bleeding she had thrown down to catch the blood. These she carried away out of the tents, and threw into the sea, carefully dispersing them abroad, as if desirous that no one should be reminded of her action by the sight of them. She then went into the river, and after washing her whole body, returned to the tents, as lively and cheerful as any one of them. In breakfast, Mr. Molyneux came ashore, and the moment he entered the tent, fixing his eyes upon a woman who was sitting there, declared her to be the dolphin's queen. She also instantly acknowledged him to be a person whom she had seen before. Our attention was now entirely diverted from every other object to the examination of a personage we had heard so much of in Europe. She appeared to be about 40, tall and very lusty, her skin white, and her eyes full of meaning. She might have been handsome when young, but now few or no traces of it were left. As soon as Her Majesty's quality was known to us, she was invited to go on board the ship, where no presents were spared that were thought to be agreeable to her, in consideration of the service she had been of to the dolphin. Among other things, a child's doll was given to her, of which she seemed very fond. On her landing, she met Hercules, who for the future I shall call by his real name, Tutahah. She showed him her presents. He became uneasy, nor was he satisfied till he had also got a doll given to him, which he now seemed to prefer to a hatchet that he had in return for presents, though after this time the dolls were of no kind of value. The men who visited us constantly eat with us of our provisions, but the women never had been prevailed on to taste a morsel. Today, however, they retired sometime after dinner into the servants' apartment, and eat there a large quantity of plantains, though they could not be persuaded to eat with us. A mystery we find it very difficult to account for. 1769, April 29. My first business this morning was to see the promise I had made to Tuburai and Tomio of the butchers being punished performed, a promise they had not failed to remind me of yesterday, when the crowd of people who were with us hindered it from being performed. In consequence of this, I took them on board of the ship, where Captain Cook immediately ordered the offender to be punished. They stood quietly and saw him stripped and fastened to the rigging, but as soon as the first blow was given, interfered with many tears, begging the punishment might cease, a request which the captain would not comply with. On my return ashore, I proceeded to pay a visit to Her Majesty Oberea, as I shall for the future call her. She, I was told, was still asleep in her canoe awning, where I intended to call up Her Majesty, but was surprised to find her in bed with a handsome, lusty young man of about 25, whose name was Obadi. I, however, understood that he was her gallant, a circumstance which she made not the least secret of. Upon my arrival, Her Majesty proceeded to put on her breeches, which done, she clothed me in fine cloth, and proceeded with me to the tents. At night I visited Taburai, as I often did by candlelight, and found him and all his family in a most melancholy mood. Most of them shed tears, so that I soon left them, without being at all able to find out the cause of their grief. Uhwa, the dolphin's old man, and another, who we did not know, had prophesied to some of our people that in 4 days we should fire our guns. This was the 4th night, and the circumstance of Tuburai crying over me, as it was interpreted, alarmed our officers a good deal. The sentries therefore doubled, and we sleep tonight under arms. 1769, April 30. A very strict watch was kept last night as intended. At 2 in the morning myself went round the point, found everything so quiet that I had no kind of doubts. Our little fortification is now complete. It consists of high breastworks at each end, the front palisades, and the rear, guarded by the river, on the bank of which are placed full water casks. At every angle is mounted a swivel and 2 carriage guns, pointing the 2 ways by which the Indians might attack us out of the woods. Our sentries are also as well relieved as they could be in the most regular fortification. About 10, Tomio came running to the tents. She seized my hand and told me that Taburai was dying, and I must go instantly with her to his house. I went and found him leaning his head against a post. He had vomited, they said, and he told me he should certainly die in consequence of something our people had given him to eat, the remains of which were showed me carefully wrapped up in a leaf. This, upon examination, I found to be a chew of tobacco, which he had begged of some of our people, and trying to imitate them in keeping it in his mouth, as he saw them do, had chewed it almost to powder, swallowing his spittle. I was now master of his disease, for which I prescribed coconut milk, which soon restored him to health. End of section 11. 1769, April, Part 2.